Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 30. Today we have Anna Jones. Anna, if you'd like to say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
I'm just going to call myself everyone for the rest of the day.
Before we get on into another excellent episode of the R2Kast, I would just like to thank the sponsor for the show today, The Scottish Farmer. A weekly magazine highlighting everything you need to know regarding the Scottish agricultural industry, whether it's breaking news, events happening in the sector, market reports, classified ads, or just wholesome stories happening in the industry. The Scottish Farmer's got it for you.
I keep saying another interesting story. I've got to stop saying it. It's such a boring statement. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't. But you could say today's is maybe a wee bit different to the norm from what we have in the R2Kast. You often get farmers or people in production, but Anna's sort of core profession is journalism, which is quite interesting given I guess I'm slightly becoming one of the journalists, but probably a very poor one. We shall see as we go though. Anna, from a farm, we'll sort of start way back when. From a farm, that sounded like I'm calling you old. What I meant is
way back when, in times of yore, in the olden days when I was born.
That's not what I meant. I said that and I realised that did not sound good. Born from a few generations of farmers. Could you tell us a bit about that, where it is, maybe a bit about the farm as well, and not way back when, just whenever?
Well, I'm a child of the 80s, and I was born on the Welsh border. So the nearest town is Oswestry, and we're in Shropshire. And our farm is a little tiny family-owned beef and sheep farm on top of a hill, half a mile from the Welsh border. We're just on the English side. And my family on my mum's side and my dad's side have been rooted in that area within like a 10-mile radius since the 1700s. So we haven't moved very far. In the direct line, I've had cousins and aunties and uncles, of course, that have gone far and wide, but in the direct line, mum and dad, that's where we're from. And we're very much hybrids, border people. When you talk to border people, they rarely identify as Welsh or English. My dad has always called himself a borderman.
Right.
We're border people. And so even though, I was brought up on the English side, and I've got a Shropshire postcode, I went to school in Wales. So I went to Welsh-speaking primary school and a secondary school. I wasn't in the Welsh stream, I was in the English stream, but still learnt Welsh, went to a Welsh young farmers club. So growing up, my life was a real mix of English and Welsh influences. And Offers Dyke is only a couple of miles, or even a mile, I think, less than a mile down the road from mum and dad's farm. So, the ancient border between the English and the Welsh. So, that's where I'm born and bred and grew up.
It's quite cool that, I don't know, just quickly before I say this, Anna, I don't know if your camera meant to go off, but I've just noticed it's went off the minute. If it can be on, great. If not, don't worry. I don't know why. There we are.
That's really weird. I don't know how it did that. At what point did it go off?
Just about just about a quarter way through you speaking.
Oh no! Do you want me to do it again?
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's absolutely grand. What's quite interesting is sort of listening to that. The border being there, but it not being a border, it almost being a place in itself. It's quite interesting where you said my ex-partner's family was from Llangollen, so that must be pretty nearby. So
yes, it is.
Yeah.
I know it well. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, very. And it's, when we went down, it was quite interesting because it's actually very like Scotland. It just seems very similar. So very, very nice upbringing. I still can't get out of my head. I said way back when. I can't get away from it.
I was born in 1981.
Well, see, that's I'm a 90s. It's only one away. It's fine.
Yeah. Knocking on a bit now, though. I turned 40 this year, which was scary. And I really didn't like it. Not a fan of being 40.
Oh, There's no difference. It's just another day, isn't it? Anyway,
It is, yeah. Think of
we're
it that way.
focusing on the wrong thing here. I've set a negative precedent for this podcast by accident.
Yeah, I went on. I talked about how old I am, and that was that.
This is the thing. I come on here to talk to a journalist and try and do a good job and absolutely ruin it. Anyway, here we are.
That's great. It makes it different.
And that is what I definitely am. Yeah. So brought up on a farm. Interested, you would say, in this farming side, but always from quite a young age. I've done some research, by the way. Quite a young age, interested in journalism, which really interests me because that's not something many folks say. You don't hear many folks say in school, "I want to be a journalist." I think this is really interesting, so I'm looking forward to where this is. What it was that made that happen? Why did that come
about? Okay, so I wanted to be a journalist for a long time. It was young, actually, 12, 13 maybe. Right. But it's a very uncool reason why I chose that profession. Because I always knew that I wanted to have like a job in the city, because I always used to think women that lived and worked in the city were really cool. And, I always used to have images when I was really young. Like I used to want to be a lawyer, and I would stride around with a briefcase. And, I used to really, when you watch like power women on like films or something, and they really stride and march and stomp their feet in their heels. And it's just like, I'm so busy, I've got somewhere to go. And I always used to think, I want to be like one of those women. And then it was a lawyer for ages, because I thought that sounded cool. And then when I was about 12 or 13, do you remember those? I think they were called like PSE classes or something in school. Do you remember?
Personal and social education, is that?
Yeah, that's it. And then they'd come in and they'd try and develop you for, adult life when it comes, and, career development and all these kind of things. So then we had this PSE teacher woman who went around the class and said, what would everyone like to be when they grow up? And I was going to say lawyer. Didn't really know what a lawyer was. And then one of the girls in my class said a journalist. And I don't think I'd ever heard the word journalist before. I knew what it meant immediately. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, that's me. I love writing. I love talking, and I'm really bloody nosy. And I was like, that's what I want to be. So lawyer went out of the window, never thought about being a lawyer ever again. And thank goodness I'm a terrible details person. I would not be a good lawyer. But I love being a journalist. And from that moment, it just became my complete and utter focus. And all my work experience during GCSEs and A-levels was on the local newspaper in Oswestry, then at the local BBC radio station in Shrewsbury, and then went on to study journalism at university in Preston. And then when I left university, I was really lucky and managed to get a job as a writer on a series of magazines straight away. And then it kind of went from there to local newspapers, regional newspapers, and then eventually the BBC. So if that girl in my class had never said journalist, I could be a lawyer right now. I'm probably really bored. So I'm really thankful to her.
I love the I guess belief you have in 13-year-old you that the decision you made that day was where you would be.
Yeah, I tend to be quite single-minded once I make my mind up on something.
I wish I had that ability. I think if we were following the same things here, I would be at WrestleMania next month competing. I mean, that's sort of where my goals were as a 12-year-old. Probably still, to be honest. But yeah, so I had a few places at local papers, work experiences, that sort of thing, and then moved on to the BBC. What did that mean? What was that? What's that involved?
Well, when I was on regional newspaper in the West Midlands, the Express and Star, which is a big daily newspaper in the West Midlands, I was covering sort of general news and features, and really loved that job. But it was around that time that I started to feel that pull back to agriculture. So even though I haven't inherited what my dad has, that special X factor to farm, I've definitely inherited the passion for agriculture, that innate interest is there, and it is in me. And I really felt that I wanted to do my bit by somehow bringing my journalism career and my agricultural background together. And the only way, again, a single-minded decision, I decided that it was going to be Countryfile. I was going to work on Countryfile because I used to watch it. It was on a Sunday morning then, about 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And I used to watch it and think, oh, I really want to work on that program. I just saw it as the perfect blend of my skills. So I just started doing really weird things, like writing the names down of the producers and then sending them letters, and and kind of like articles that I'd had in the newspaper, sort of sending them into the BBC. And eventually I got a 6-week contract at the BBC, not on Countryfile, on a different programme called The Nature of Britain, which was presented by Alan Titchmarsh and went out on BBC Two. This was way back, this was like 2006. And
Right.
It was a 6-week contract. And I gave up a staff job on a newspaper with, holiday, pension, all of the stuff for a 6-week contract. And I was like, this is a big gamble. This might not pay off. And on the last day of that contract, I swear to God, a job for a researcher came up on Countryfile, but it was internal. You could only apply for it if you were BBC staff. And I had like 6 hours left of my BBC contract before I was shoved out and I was external again. So I was like, oh my God, a researcher job on Countryfile, I've got to apply for this. And, and I don't know if you've ever filled out a BBC application form. It is very in-depth. It takes a long time. So I think I was up till like midnight to get this in time. And and then I got an interview, which was terrifying. And then I got the job as a researcher on Countryfile in September 2006. And that really was the beginning of the rest of my career. Everything since that moment has been focused on rural affairs and agriculture. And that's really where I started the road towards becoming a specialist journalist, which has kind of led me to where I am now.
It's that 6-week opportunity is one of those ones that certainly when I hear it is you couldn't say no, even though you are getting rid of holidays and stuff. I think that's something you've got to jump at. I will actually come back to Countryfile, but there's one thing I read when I was doing my research that I really wanted to mention. You didn't do a dissertation, but you did a documentary on foot and mouth.
Yes.
Now that interests me because foot and mouth. God, what age was I? I remember. I think it'd have been 2001. I remember my dad talking about it on the. I remember Dad watching the telly and hearing this thing, foot and mouth, and he was really worried about it. And I'm like, Dad, I've never seen you so worried since like Celtic beat Rangers. That's the last time I've seen this. Why is this such an issue? It's fine. It's not our sheep. They're okay. And I never got it, obviously, because I was too young. And then was it 2007? I think the second outbreak was.
Yeah.
But what did that involve? That must have been quite interesting to make that. Was it at the time or was it just after?
So 2001, which was foot and mouth. I actually went, I was living in the Netherlands during the height of the foot and mouth outbreak, with all of the burning pyres of animals and the horror. I was actually out of the country. I was living in the Netherlands because I was doing this exchange scheme. It was called the Erasmus scheme. You could go and study for a semester in another country. So I was kind of doing journalism stuff there. And even though I was writing to my mum and getting letters back, it was still kind of, mum and dad weren't on email, so it was still a bit snail mail-ish even then. And mum was writing to me about this terrible time they were going through. And I was worried about them, but in that way that was I 18, 19, something like that. You're also a little bit wrapped up in yourself at that time. You're having so much, I'm a student, I'm having so much fun. And I knew there was this terrible thing happening back home. And I knew that mum and dad were having this awful time, but partly to do with the distance and partly to do with, I think as a teenager, you only have a limited capacity to understand things because you are an inherently selfish being as a teenager and a student. I just felt very detached from it all. And anyway, when I got home from the Netherlands, it really hit me what my family had been through. They in many ways had it roughest because they didn't get foot and mouth. So they just had to keep everything locked down. And the stories Dad said about that lambing time, it was just awful what he was telling me, having to lamb outdoors in the rain and the mud and not being able to bring back the animals. And he told me this one story that really stuck with me all these years, of how the ground had dried up a bit, and everything had dried up a little bit and wasn't quite so muddy, but all of the mud had dried onto the animals, onto the lambs and onto the sheep, and they just dried into this claggy mud. And he remembers going to feed them, and he said it was almost like musical instruments. You could hear the sheep running down the field and all of this dried mud clacking and clanging away on them. And he said it was like music coming down the fields. They were like drumming with dried mud. And just the thought of that, and what the stress and the pain that Dad must have been through. We did lose some animals that were on some rented ground, some lowland ground away from the family farm, quite, sort of 20 odd miles away or whatever. And those had gone, but the core farm hadn't got it. So anyway, so that was that. And then in my third year, you get to choose. You can do a dissertation, you can do whatever you want. And I decided that I wanted to do radio. I've always loved radio. And I was going to make a documentary about the recovery from foot and mouth. And I suppose in some ways it was my way of learning about it, having been away the previous year. And then I made this documentary. And even then I realized that potentially I had something to offer in the world of agricultural journalism, because I was the only one on my course that had anything to do with the countryside, anything to do with farming, any interest in it, really. Everyone else made completely different topics. And not only did I have an interest in it, I was able to talk to farmers in a way that other journalism students weren't able to. I don't know how. I don't know whether it's a type of conversing or a language they pick up in me, an energy they pick up on. I don't know. I think they felt a kind of kinship, and they shared their stories with me in an incredibly honest way, broke down in tears, told me exactly what it was like. And farmers can be suspicious with their stories. They can be really guarded. A big barrier comes up. If they think you won't understand, they won't tell you. But if they feel safe in your hands and feel that you understand and empathize with them, they will tell you things that are unbelievable. And they did. And that documentary was the first time I thought, my God, I can go into these rural communities and ask questions that maybe people who are not from a farming background couldn't ask, because they wouldn't know to ask and perhaps wouldn't have the confidence to ask. And I can bring that information back into the heart of the city, back to my journalism college. And I played it for the people on my course, and people are in tears. And these are kids that come from Manchester and the middle of Bolton and big northern urban areas. And they were in tears listening to this documentary because they'd had no idea. They were like, I had no idea that was what it was like for farmers. And and I got a first. So I was like, well, this bodes well. I'll do more of this. And I love doing it. And I've built a good career out of it.
A first is one thing that eluded me in both my degrees. I got 3% or 2% or something like that from memory off a distinction in my master's. But you guys have got it easy. You get to do a 3-year before you can do your dissertation. We've got to do 4.
Yeah, and I didn't. Let me not oversell myself. I didn't get a first overall. I got a first. I got a first for that documentary. Overall, I got a 2-1 because the other modules I was not as good at. Like,
if you find the thing you can focus on, that's a good thing. It's interesting you say that the outside lambing being an issue. I assume were the inside lambing normally, and then,
normally, yes.
Yeah, we've been inside lambing now since 2013, where we had a bad thing. It wasn't foot and mouth, but we had a snow that.
Oh, I remember. Yeah,
250 or 300 stock unaccounted for from memory, and we got that shed the January. The snow came in March, and it doesn't bear thinking about what would have been, but now having lambed inside for what will be our 9th year this year, I don't really know what it would be like to go back to full outdoor lambing. I think that in itself is a challenge, well, not more than a challenge. But yeah, just a horrible time, really. Too young to really appreciate it myself, and the only thing that ever impacted me was livestock weren't allowed at our 2007 show, because it was at mid-July, the 2007 one from memory, and we were August. That's literally the only impact. I was like, why are we not getting a show? And I still didn't really understand it as whatever I was. Erasmus, I just want to quickly ask about Erasmus. We had students through Erasmus at our university coming to Scotland, which
still going on.
Yeah. Erasmus.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Brilliant.
How did that go for you? Good.
It was great. The stuff that I learned was mad and not really. Yeah, it was. It was a fantastic experience, and it was the first time I'd done something completely independent like that. And I think it probably gave me my love of travel. I'm an insatiable traveler. I absolutely love it, and I think probably it started then. And I made, it was just brilliant opportunity to make really good friendships with people who aren't like you, that speak different languages. My friends were French, Irish, Brazilian, German. These to live that kind of like expat student lifestyle with all these people that were so different to me. I think it kind of gave me a curiosity about the world and different people, different languages, different cultures. And actually, the what we had to do when we were there was it was a strange. I always remember it was a slightly strange assignment. We had to make an in-flight magazine that was aimed at African people living in Europe. So it was really niche, like really niche. So I remember it just being like, what the hell do I write about? And, having to research stories that would be interesting to that audience. And in the end, I found a shop. There was this tiny shop. I was living in this Dutch town called Tilburg, which isn't that far from Eindhoven. And I think it's Eindhoven. I'll double check that on the map, in the south. And and I found a West African shop selling lots of like interesting foods and fabrics from West Africa. And I interviewed the woman running the shop about how she'd arrived in the Netherlands and set up a business there, and how she'd brought African culture over to Europe. And even that, I mean, I'm not sure I would ever get set that assignment if I'd stayed in Preston for 3 years. So yeah, it was great to kind of build that kind of understanding of different cultures and things. So yeah, it was slightly strange, but I'm really, really glad that I did it, because it was one of those eye-opening and crucially mind-opening experiences, which I think is really important to have when you're at such an impressionable age. Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't think I could guess where in the world you would expect to find such a niche project, to be honest. It's such a randomly niche one as well. It's not just like niche to here. It's we're in a part of Europe, so let's focus purely on all of Europe for African people coming here. It's very, very niche.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was the in-flight magazine bit that I found weird. Because I was like, if it's just a newspaper, that's great. But it was like, it has to be an in-flight magazine. And I was like, I don't know, what do you do in an in-flight magazine? Like, you just put the price of Pringles in it or something. So it was mad. But it was great. And I made friends for life that I'm still in touch with as well.
No, I mean, I didn't do Erasmus. I did my undergrad and my master's both in Scotland, but my master's was in Glasgow Uni, and there was 23 of us. 17 were Chinese. There was someone from the States, someone from France, someone from Nigeria, and 3 of us from Scotland. And the stuff I learned that year from a cultural perspective was brilliant. It was almost better than what you learned.
And is it safe as a scheme? Because I worry, because it's an EU thing, isn't it? We're not going to lose it as a result of Brexit, are we?
Well, it's funny. It's I remember Erasmus being a thing because we always had we always had 1 or 2 students join our course about January. Would happen most years, but it's since I've been a lecturer, it's not happened now. We know why that is. Yeah. COVID being the reason there, but I don't know. Something I should probably look into because it's a brilliant thing. Doesn't have to be called Erasmus, but that sort of thing, brilliant.
Yeah.
So Countryfile, you were there for quite a while. What was involved in researching for Countryfile, and I can't even begin to imagine what's involved in that. They go everywhere. It's just huge. So yeah, maybe even some highlights would be good to hear.
Gosh, yeah. Well, I was on Countryfile. I was at the BBC as staff for 12 years, and most of that time was spent on Countryfile. I'd go off and do other little projects, but I'd always boomerang back to the mothership, which is Countryfile. And so I started off as a researcher, I never know. But and the job was about finding the stories, but also setting up the stories and making the logistics of a shoot happen. So, half of the job was journalism, and the other half of the job was making sure you can get all of these people in the right place at the right time, and you can get the planes and the boats and the trains and the cars to all link up and get everyone there, and make sure that they've got a schedule and they've got long enough to film and stuff. So you had to have a really journalistic editorial head, but also a real a good organizational head as well. So it's sort of a job of two halves. And the journalism side was always my favorite. And that just involved talking to loads of people on the phone, coming up with story ideas, and then trying to get the stories past the gatekeepers, the producers, who are hard nuts to crack. So if you came to them with a crap story, they would sniff it out in you could try and dress it up any way you like, I'm going to try and put a bit of polish on this turd. They would know it's a turd and they would turn it down. So, the producers at the BBC are so brilliant, and they really put you through your paces. So I learned, it was a steep learning curve, and, there were certain stories that came up all the time. So the winter is hard on Countryfile because not much to see. It goes dark so early. The countryside looks brown and twiggy and sticky, and so you'd ring up conservation organizations. You'd be like, oh, is there anything interesting happening that we could come and film for Countryfile? And they'd be like, oh, well, we'll be doing some footpath maintenance and some scrub clearance. And you'd be like, oh, okay. And so you'd go to the producer and be like, right, well, I've been speaking to the wildlife trusts, and they said that they could get our presenter doing a bit of scrub bashing. And I thought scrub bashing sounds a bit more exciting than scrub clearance. And you could just see the producers just being like, we are not doing scrub clearance again. We have done it a billion times. Go and find something else. And you'd be like, oh, okay. So, this was the sort of the challenge of Countryfile, and you just had to be creative about what the stuff that you found. But I did some amazing things. I've traveled all over the country. I've been sort of husky sled racing in the Cairngorms of Scotland with Matt Baker and Julia Bradbury at the time. I've traveled over to Denmark and the Netherlands, making investigative films there with Tom Heap. I've been over to Northern Ireland, filmed pigs on a boat, and there's just all sorts of stuff that I've done, and it's really hard to kind of pick things out. One of my favorites was actually hop picking in Kent. I always remember that shoot. I really enjoyed it with John Craven, and it was a bit of a social history film because we talked about how people used to travel out from the East End of London to the hop fields of Kent as their holidays, August, September time, and they would pick hops. And we found this amazing black and white archive of EastEnders going out and picking the hops at harvest time. So, it wasn't just always about where you went on Countryfile. It was what you learned through the research and what the archive showed you about the countryside and food production over the years. And then I kind of moved my way up the ladder from researcher to director. And then as a director, you're starting to take on a lot more responsibility. You're the one in charge of writing the scripts, directing the presenters, directing the crews. You're really starting to become sort of the linchpin of a film. Like, you know, you're managing the researcher, you're sort of guiding them, and then you're also turning their research into a script that, you know, so that's stressful. That is a stressful job. It was a big learning curve, and I found that part of my career hard. Stepping up from researcher to director, it was tough. And then from there I went to producer in more recent years, and that's really getting higher sort of responsibility. It's really starting to manage people there, and rather than being responsible for one film, like a 6 or 7 minute film, you're starting to take responsibility for a whole hour-long program. So you've got to have a real editorial focus across a whole hour. So you can see how the responsibility grows up and up and up. But yeah, it's a fantastic program to work on, you know, and over the years I've been there. John Craven, Adam Henson, Tom Heap, Charlotte Smith, you know, I count these people as friends. You know, that we've had a lot of nights in hotels after long shoots together, sort of chatting away, and you really build this incredible team spirit, because you get very wet, very cold, just standing around. And the thing is, you have to be really hard to work on Countryfile. People think it's Townyfile, people think it's soft. It is hardcore, because at least if you're a farmer and you're outside in the elements, at least you're working to keep you warm. You're using your body, you're lifting bales, you're feeding sheep, you're walking around doing stuff. To work on Countryfile, you go out in that weather, rain, wind, hail, fog, whatever it is, and you just stand there in it. You just stand there, you know, filming, like static, just freezing your ass off. Like, you have to be made of tougher stuff to stand still in harsh weather conditions than actually be working and keeping warm.
That is completely true. Now, I mean, to compare the content I make to Countryfile seems insane, but I did a lot of making videos for students, and you were standing still trying to set up cameras. And one day I was doing this fencing tutorial, and I was like, I just want to batter in stabs. But the other times I'm trying to keep the camera still. You're absolutely correct.
Trying to operate a camera in the snow and your hands have gone completely numb, and I get that Raynaud's thing where all your fingers go white. Oh, yeah. And you've just got these inanimate stumps on the end of your arms that are just not working, and you're trying to write notes on your clipboard and you can't even feel the pen. Like, I have been frozen to the bone on that program.
like keeping your hands up with your knees, like
yeah, honestly. But yeah, I wouldn't change any of it.
Just a hopeless plug for you listeners, if you haven't been around for long, if you would like to see the people on the other side. We did a podcast with Adam Henson back, R2Kast number 25 at Christmas time, so have a look at that if you want. I think a lot of people think of TV as just, it's just TV. You're on the TV, you're producing TV or whatever, you collect a big paycheck. That's what a lot of people see TV as.
Oh my God.
And I absolutely know that is not the case, right?
No. Absolutely not.
Very light work with the BBC up here in Scotland. I do here and there, and it's just not the case. Like, no. It's not talking anywhere near the level you've been involved in. But
and on the big paycheck thing, it's a very, very competitive industry, and any farmer who understands supply and demand will know that if there is an oversupply, the price goes down. TV is no difference. There is an oversupply of people that want to work in that industry. So the wages are not good. They don't have to be good, because there's like 1 billion people that want to do the job for like nothing. And the amount of people that start off their TV careers and literally work for nothing just to get in. So, you know, the idea that it's well paid is a total myth. Myth. So, yeah, and it is hard work. I think it's, on average, it's 1 hour of filming for 1 minute of television.
I could believe that.
Yeah. If that, like, and I've made 3-minute films that have taken all day to film, and like start off at 8, finish at when it goes dark to make 3.5 minutes.
And to think of how much on-demand stuff is out there, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
I had a couple of guys come over and film on the farm one day for a thing, and we filmed from, I would say, 10 to about 2, And I was like, oh, class, it's going to be like 20 minutes about Wallace. It was a minute and 51 seconds. You know, like, yeah, no, it's a different game from what you see. And I think a lot of people don't know that. I say that as if I'm involved.
But it's true. I'm constantly preparing farmers. Like they will be there all day. And you'll be on telly for about 20 seconds.
Yeah. I filmed that in October, and I still know the full lines because I said it like 4 million times. Like,
yes.
Sourcing locally, that's what does it for me. And that actually, you know,
it's burned into your brain.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, can I take that out and put useful stuff back in there?
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
You've moved on from Countryfile to work freelance. I assume that's got to be a big jump, is it not? It's got to be. Well, you're obviously creating your own work when you're working full time, but you're sort of trying to find your own, I take it. And what's that led you into?
Well, that was another mad thing that I did. I did a Nuffield scholarship. Have you had many Nuffield farming scholars on that?
Haven't had any, and this was my next point. I've got it written down here that I was going to cover.
Yeah, so
tell us about that.
Yeah, so Nuffield farming scholars are a strange breed. So I did a scholarship in 2016, 2017, and I traveled around the world looking at the coverage of agriculture in the mainstream media and how farming issues are portrayed to the public. And it filled my head with all these ideas. It really made me feel like I wanted to have a voice and I wanted to do something to help a situation that I thought wasn't great. And at the BBC, you are so busy. You're also a tiny cog in a massive machine, and it is not your job to have a voice. It is your job to put your shoulder to the wheel with everyone else and work at it, which I've done for so many years. And I think 2018, I came back having had this mind-blowing experience on my Nuffield. I just couldn't go back. It was like trying to put a square peg back in a round hole. And I just felt like I've got to go my own way now. I've got to go my own way and find a voice of my own. And so I decided, oh God, it took me a long time. I mean, I'm making it sound like I, had this epiphany and then on Monday handed in my notice and it was all great. Like if my partner Alex was here, he'd be shaking his head going, it was a nightmare. It took me 2 years and I was just stressing out. It's like, what about if giving up a pension and giving up my staff job and I'll never find work again? And I had this real fear of upsetting my bosses on Countryfile because I have so much loyalty to that program and I owe so much to that program. I would not be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for Countryfile and if it wasn't for Farming Today. So I felt this, oh God, I don't want to upset them. I don't want them to think I'm not grateful for all the opportunities. So I really hauled myself over the coals, but then I did eventually decide to leave, which it was handing over that letter of resignation at the BBC was the hardest thing I think I've ever done, actually. So there I was out doing it, going it alone. And you're right, freelance is about finding your way. But the one thing I'm very, very grateful for is I'd already built quite a big foundation for myself and I hadn't really recognized that. And so when I did go out into the freelance world, I was like, oh, a couple of people know who I am and they've offered me work and, oh, this isn't as scary as I thought it would be. And it hasn't been as scary as I thought it would be. The only problem is now is that I just never stop working. I really struggle to switch off.
Right, yeah, I can imagine.
The boundaries have gone and suddenly you just fill all your time with work, and that's something I'm still getting to grips with, how to say no.
So are you working as producer, director, everything, or what? It just
oh God, all sorts of stuff. Like honestly, so I do. So when I go back to TV, I'll be a producer director. So if I'm working for Countryfile, I'll go back as a producer.
Oh, so you still do some stuff with Countryfile?
Yes, so I've done the Harvest special for Countryfile in 2020 and 21. I produced, and then I also direct very occasionally, and that's the TV side of my job. The radio side of my job can be anything from producing, reporting, occasionally presenting. I'll stand in for Charlotte Smith and Anna Hill on Farming Today, very, very occasionally, and other radio programs like On Your Farm. And then I have my own project called Just Farmers, which is a bit of a charitable endeavor, really. That's the kind of altruistic thing that I do. I'll talk about later. Then there's the writing with the book. And then there's the public speaking and conference chairing. I do a lot of that. There's something else I'm missing out as well. There's training. Me and my other half, we set up this thing where we train people how to make videos on their phones, because he's a cameraman, like a director cameraman. Right. So I am in a situation where I have taken on gargantuan amounts of things. And it's fabulous, but I'm not sure it's always great.
It's I mean, we talk about this work-life balance thing, don't we? And
yes, I don't have any.
Well, this is it. You just have a work balance, which doesn't work. Well, it does work, and it's exciting, isn't it? And chasing that thing is exciting, but you do sometimes have to switch off.
You do, and
it's hard.
If you're somebody, I mean, what a great honor it is to enjoy what you do for a job, and I'm sure, Wallace, you feel the same.
No, 100%. I say it all the time.
Oh. It is a winning lottery ticket in life to be able to do a job that you love. So many people, and I plenty of people I know, even me back in the day, did jobs I didn't like. And the problem is, when you love it, you do just want to do it all the time. And because you love it, you don't recognize that there's a cost, and actually there is. So that's an ongoing journey, learning where the boundaries are and where the lines are. But ultimately, I do feel really lucky to love what I do. I really do.
No, I mean, lottery ticket's a good example. I mean, my work laptop was having issues with Wi-Fi, so IT have got it over the weekend, and I got back here and I was like, I want to do some work. This is so sad.
My fingers are itching. I need to type.
Exactly. Yeah. Just a complete random one to ask you here. The video editing, do you use LumaFusion or not?
Oh my God, no. What is that?
Well, it's from what I can understand, I can't find a better one on Apple. I use LumaFusion to edit all this stuff, to edit everything I do, whether it's on my phone, whether it's on my iPad. LumaFusion is what I use, because you can't get Premiere Pro on them. And I'm not quite at the stage of buying a computer to do it. So yeah, no, just wondered, just when you're talking about on the phone, that was certainly my go-to, was LumaFusion.
Right. Oh, well, we should talk about that. For videos, there's loads of different apps. And one of the things we do on the workshop is, I'm a Samsung baby. I've always been an Android girl. My other half is an Apple boy. He does everything is Apple. So
he sounds really cool.
Yeah, he's the cool one. He's got his MacBook Air. And I've got this like big lumpy PC, and but I've just always been like that. And actually, it's useful because we can then bring that into the training and just talk to people about how these two things do not talk to each other. It's a flipping nightmare trying to get stuff between the two. And honestly, the amounts of times we have been up late at night, something has been filmed on my Samsung phone, I've transferred the files for him to edit it on his Mac, and everything's out of sync because they have different frame rates and they don't talk to each other. And I just hate this. Why can't people just work together and make systems that work together? But that would be
money.
Very naive of me thing to say. But it is useful, because if we're experiencing those frustrations, it's easy, it's good for the people that do our courses, because I hate nothing more than going and doing a course where everything just works seamlessly for the trainer, and then you go home and have a go at it and nothing works for you. And so we can sympathize with people.
Just a little solution. I love when little rabbit holes like this are found. So AirBridge is a transferring app that has Android and iOS compatibility, and it's free up to 20 gig. So
oh my God, that'll change my life.
that might have changed some things, yeah.
Airbridge.
Airbridge, yeah. So you have the video on your phone, your laptop, whatever, and you send it via email, but it comes through Airbridge. It's not really sent via email, and then you just download it through a link. It's really good.
That sounds amazing. You need to come and run our course too.
Welcome to the R2Kast, where we don't just cover the people in food and farming, we also talk about video editing.
And also the benefits of talking to someone born in the 90s compared to someone born in the 80s.
Really closer to the 2000s, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. God, rub it in, why don't you?
The Nuffield Scholarship sounds brilliant there. I mean, just traveling the world, following what you're interested in. And I'm going to ask you a question that you might not want to answer, and that's absolutely fine if you don't. What do you think about the Panorama programme on dairy farming last week?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet, and here's why. We were running a workshop for farmers in Bristol.
Right.
So the project that I was talking about, Just Farmers, we actually do these communications and sort of confidence building workshops for groups of independent farmers. We bring 12 or 13 of them together, and we do sort of 2 days intensive training, and we spend all the time with them. So we were on our way down to Bristol for that, and it was such a busy couple of days, so it's on my what to watch list. Yeah. Sorry, I've seen some of the fallout, and I talked to my dad about it on the way back from Bristol, and me and my dad talked on the phone about it for ages, and he was giving his impressions. From what I've heard, it sounds like another expose of poor welfare on a dairy farm. Does that pretty much sum it up?
So I think that part in itself is good. I think it's the sort of, I can't comment because I've told you about 3 times I've watched nothing. But from what I've heard and from what I understand, yes. And I think we have to see that side, and that's good that we're talking that bad welfare happens and we have to get rid of that. I think it's sort of the idea that it comes with, to the people that don't know about it, it sort of comes with a sort of tarring of the same brush type idea, you know. But no, maybe easier for you that you haven't seen it. But a conflict.
My dad was telling me about some of the images in it, and he was absolutely shocked. And right. Yeah, so yes, and you could apply that same thing to lots of documentaries that come out about farming. It's about the one bad apple, but I don't know. I need to see it, but I was going to say that, you know, it is important that we see examples of what is going on, because
could not agree more. Yeah,
we need to. I do think we need to have more accountability. Amy, did you see Amy Jackson had put a tweet? Have a look for. I think her name is @Oxtail on Twitter, but she put a tweet on about more accountability within farming and about people working in the industry standing up and calling out these people from within. You know, stop waiting from people on the outside to call it out. If we could call it out first on the inside and be ahead of it, that would show that we're serious about rooting out this.
I think that gives us much more credibility as the farming demographic as well. Yeah, no, very, very good outlook on it. Which you've just mentioned. This is actually why contact was originally made between myself and Anna. Anna is now an author. Well, you've probably been an author before, but you get an author.
No, new author.
Oh, are you? Perfect, excellent, very good. It is called. I'm going to say the title, and that's about all I've got, and I'm going to leave the rest to you. It comes out on. This is coming out on Friday, so it comes out on Thursday, which will be the 3rd of March. So if you're interested in the relationship crisis between town and country, definitely didn't read that. Get Anna's new book, Divide. Have you got it there by any chance, Anna? Yep, perfect. There we are. It's a really nice cover, by the way.
I love it, and I've never met the man who designed it, but his name is Paul Palmer Edwards. I need to track down who that man is, because I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm really, really chuffed with it.
Paul, if you're listening, get in touch.
I have looked for him on social media and can't find him. So, but I will find him. I will find you, Paul.
You're a journalist. You're good at this.
Say thank you for this. So it's this has just arrived. I opened it night before last. A big cardboard box of the first 10 books arrived, and I opened it with some mates. And yeah, to pick up the book that you've written and hold it in your hands and look at it is it's something I've dreamt about my whole life, to be honest. Like writing a book, I think for somebody that loves to write, it's got to be something that you just dream about. It is a dream. And so here it is, and I keep looking at it all the time, and I keep sort of, I should be doing the washing up and stuff, and I keep being like, oh, I'm just going to go and have a little look at my book. Just so like Alex keeps finding me, just sort of like holding it. But you know, I don't think I've ever worked. Yeah, exactly. Take it with me everywhere. But I don't think I've ever worked on anything so hard and put so much of myself into it as well. And it is a story about, it's half journalistic, so you know, lots of interviews, lots of case studies with people talking about various different issues, but part autobiographical, I suppose. It's about growing up in the very small farming community, and the sort of traditional conservative working class values I was brought up with, and never really thought about until I moved to the city. Not when I went to university. It was when I moved to Birmingham to work for the BBC when I was 25 that I really recognised the massive difference between my rural identity and my urban identity, and how the two are just in conflict over so many things. And the book is about, I suppose, coming to terms with being neither one or the other, and that being a difficult thing to come to terms with. I've always felt like I've been trying to get back. I've always wanted to get back to my rural roots and that farming girl I was. And that it's a horrible realization at first when you realize that you've changed and you're different. And those years spent in the city, I mean, I lived in Birmingham, I lived in Manchester and Bristol, worked for the BBC, had a very urban, metropolitan, middle class lifestyle. And realizing that you know, for the 15 years, 15 years has changed me. And you can't go back necessarily and be the person that you were. And that's been upsetting for me, and I've struggled to come to terms with that. And I suppose the book has helped me kind of accept that it's all right to be a bit of both. It's all right to be a hybrid. You can be a bit country and a bit towny, and that's all right. The lonely thing is that you never really fit in with the tribe on either side. You always feel like you're a little bit outside. And some of the debates and the conversations can be very binary. They can be very simplistic. And because you're a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, you can't really join in, because you know that it's not that simple. And it is more complicated than that, and it's more nuanced. But often I don't say anything, because in order to really dig into those nuances, you're going to have to kind of bore people for a few hours. And people in the heat of the moment, in the heat of a debate, people just want to rant and get their side across, and they don't really want to know that there's all of this different layers of stuff. So often I just sort of sit there quietly, or end up having a row that can never be won. So the book is kind of about me trying to put those two sides of myself across, and trying to get that perspective of having one foot in both camps and trying to get both sides across. That's the aim anyway. I don't know whether I pull it off, but it's what I try to achieve.
Would you say it's you based, or a general look at that divide, or
both.
A bit of both?
Both, definitely a bit of both. So I'd say half of it is taking the views and opinions that I know are out there, because I'm a journalist and I listen to them all the time, and then talking generally about that. So it does generalize, you know, it very much takes a general look at these things, but then to drill into the specifics, it's kind of my story and my experiences and anecdotes and things like that. But it's not a heavy read. It's a book that's got some funny bits in it, I hope, and lots of anecdotes. And it's written in the way that I talk. It's not an academic book, and it's not highbrow. I couldn't write a highbrow book if I tried anyway. So, but so it's a book. And, working, lots of people in the farming industry say, oh, I never read. Like my dad's never read a book. And,
well, I'll tell you now, I've never read a book.
Loads, but it's completely normal. Loads of people. And I don't read that many. I'm a really slow reader. And I've got this massive imposter syndrome about being an author, because I'm worried I'm going to go to all these authory events and people are going to go, so tell us what writers really inspire you. And I'm just going to be like, oh God, I read about 3 books a year because I'm like a snail.
Hey, can I be my own inspiration there?
I'm just like, oh God. So, I think that's perfectly fine. And I've tried to write a book for people that don't read. People that say they don't like reading will hopefully enjoy reading this. And the reason I hope that is when I did my Nuffield report, I was at the Nuffield conference, and a farmer from the Orkneys, beef farmer from high up there, he came and talked to me, and he says, I've never read a book, I never read newspapers, I never read, but I sat down with your Nuffield report and I read it from cover to cover and I really loved it. And I was like, well, if I can get that chap to read my Nuffield report, hopefully I can get, so I've already messaged him and been like, well, if you like my Nuffield report, maybe you'll read my book. So yeah, that's the hope anyway.
And I mean, that's quite a compliment, isn't it? Really?
Oh, it's the biggest compliment I've ever had, really.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Would you say, you've called it the relationship crisis, that makes you think most definitely negative. Would you say it was negative? What obviously you don't want to give too much away, but what did you sort of draw? What conclusions did you draw from writing the book, I guess?
When you look at groups and ideologies and the tribal stuff, the belief system stuff, when you look at it at that level, there is a divide and it is negative and it is a relationship crisis.
Yeah.
When you break it down to people and individuals and stories, it's not a crisis. It totally disappears.
Right.
Because the individuals that I talk to, I've never actually met an individual person who is actually like what we see on social media and is that that sort of polarized in their thinking, and will not look at any other point of view. And maybe I've been lucky, but most people are not like that. But when they start getting into their groups and their echo chambers and their little cliques, they start to become like that. And that's what's created the relationship crisis. But when you start breaking it down to individuals, I do find that it's so much more positive and feel good. And you realize there's a lot more to be happy about than angry about. So that's probably how I'd answer that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never see an activist on their own, do you? They're just a person. Activism sort of comes in groups, and people can be passionate about the thing they believe in, and you can maybe see that as an activist, but in general, the sort of militant activism, if you will, is normally as a group.
And I'm not anti-activist. We need activism in order to drive change. Yeah. And the way I see it, there are different types of people in the world. Like, I actually envy activists. I wish I could be like that, but I'm not. I'm just not wired that way. I'm far more of a diplomat. And the way I see it is the world needs activists to make us all lift our heads up and go, oh, there's a problem. Oh God, we should probably sort it out. Yeah. And if you didn't have activists kind of shaking us, going, wake up, we wouldn't get anything done. So we need activists, but we also, just as importantly, need diplomats. And we need people that can bring people together and have constructive conversation and kind of say, right, okay, what are we going to do? And I sometimes feel that in whether it's social media, whatever the drivers are for it, we've come to an age where the activists have probably got just a little bit too much of the attention, and the diplomats, who are equally important, haven't quite got enough of the attention. And, you know, that's because activists are probably more interesting to watch, aren't they?
Well, it sells better, doesn't it?
I mean, sells so much better.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm very much more on the diplomat side myself. I've always sort of been of the opinion, you know, why fight fire with fire when you can use water? You know, it's just let's have a chat about it, see where we go. But you're right. I'd never considered the sort of side that to get to that chat, you have to have the activists pushing it. That's it's a cool thought. So for any of you guys that are either bookworms already or, as Anna's just said, not bookworms, because I am going to read it. I'll probably speak to you in like 2026 and be like, first chapter's great, I'm getting there. But we'll maybe get there. Have a look out for Anna's new book, Divide. Also follow Anna on Instagram if you want to see any more information about it. Jones the Journal is Anna's Instagram. And it's been great, Anna, to sort of go through your life from start to finish, even if I did say the wrong phrase earlier on. And sort of talk about your book, the sort of reason that this originally came about. But if you have listened to the podcasts to the end, you might know this. If you haven't, you won't know it. Don't feel pressured at all. There's 2 questions that finish every podcast. The first one being, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And also, if you had any tips for someone coming into, well, let's look at journalism, maybe even as an author, what would they be?
Okay, I'm going to take the 5-year 1 second, because I live in fear of that question. I'll tell you why in a minute. My advice for somebody is, for some reason, agricultural journalism has never been seen as very sexy to journalism students and graduates. They always want to go and do economics or crime or foreign correspondent or education, health, pretty much anything. But agriculture has had this horrible reputation as a bit of a kind of backwater, and where a journalism career goes to die. And
right.
I know that is true. I've come across that attitude at the BBC, and it is so wrong. It's so misguided. This rural affairs and agriculture has been the most rewarding genre to work in, because it taps into amazing subjects: environment, food, psychology, you know, mental health around it is huge at the moment. There is so much that it sort of feeds into. And if you're an ambitious young journalist, think about giving it a go, because you can make a hell of a career out of it. So that would be my advice to a young journalist. Where I see myself in 5 years, I don't know. And I never have known. And I've never been someone that really has a plan. I've had ambitions, work ambitions, but it's a source of it's probably what me and my partner argue about the most. Is he's a planner. He needs a plan, and he needs to know where he's going, what we're doing, and what we're aiming for. I'm a drifter, a trundler, and never really know. And that is frustrating, and it hasn't landed very well in job interviews, because I always sort of like fumble around and blag it and never really know. But I've got to this point, 40. There we go again. And I've never really known the answer to that question yet. And life has turned out pretty all right. So I'm going to carry on with not really knowing.
I think that's good. I mean, it's interesting when you say that. I'm almost like a mix of yourself and your partner in that sense. You ask any of my colleagues, I'm like a spreadsheet nerd. I've got timetables of everything. I know exactly when everything is. I know when this podcast goes out, and I know when the other ones do. Sometimes at the start I pretend I don't know, so I look normal, but I actually know exactly at the time.
Oh God, I'm not like that at all. If you saw my emails.
2 months away. After the only thing that I've got the podcast ready for like something like 3 months. Apart from that, I'm just like, I'm doing tomorrow and see what happens. It's just like a mix of the two. That's a good answer. We've never had anyone say that, and it's absolutely the truth for a lot of people. That, you know, we don't all have to know what's coming. But no, it's been great to chat. It's been great having you on. I hope you've really enjoyed your time as well.
Yeah, I really have. It's been fascinating and such a lovely chat. Thank you very much for having me.
No, been a pleasure, and thank you to everyone for listening again. You will have seen today 3 little videos of myself, either dressed funny, reading the Scottish Farmer, because it is our new sponsor of the podcast. So thank you very much for coming along, and we shall see you next week. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Wallace.
Cheers, Hannah. Speak to you later.
Well, that's it. Another R2Kast finished, another agricultural mind opened up. And I would just like to say that getting these guests on board, it does take time, and it always has done, but I've now went weekly, and with that comes even more time required. And I would just like to finally thank once more the Scottish Farmer for sponsoring the show and making that much more possible. Please be sure to get in touch if you've any ideas of people you'd like to see on the podcast, or maybe ideas you have for me presenting better, because I definitely do require that. See you in the next one.